It was adapted from the book Roadside Picnic, and it was a loose inspiration for the Stalker video game series. Today, we're going to be taking a journey to the edge of madness and back. A journey to find meaning in our lives. A journey to the center of the zone. A journey called Stalker.
Все было здесь, понимаете? Здесь, в зоне.
So today I decided to give my in-game avatar a little bit of a break and appear to you guys IRL to do the 1979 Stalker film by Andrei Tarkovsky proper justice. And when talking about the Stalker film, there's a bit of viewer division, we should say. One half regards the Stalker film as the pinnacle of cinematography and filmmaking. The other regards the film as a pretentious waste of time, best forgotten. So what do I, personally, think of the Stalker film? Well, both views are kind of valid.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
I know some of you are going to be upset that I'm choosing to sit on the fence here, but hear me out. There are a lot of things about the Stalker film that I like. The story itself is interesting, the world has great depth, the thematic choices, the characters, the cinematography is insanely good, but let's not forget about the ruthless amount of symbolism and metaphors. Jesus Christ, Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm an idiot. Okay, I can handle this level of metaphoric, symbolic, theologic, dissection, philosophical, whatever. I just can't handle it, okay? And this movie is long as hell. It's 2 hours and 40-something minutes long. This movie is a slow trudge through the story. I mean, it is a really slow burn. There's a lot of downtime in this movie where not much is happening. I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours playing the Stalker games. How can I possibly justify spending 2 hours to watch a movie? Anyway, let's talk about the plot of Stalker. So the movie opens with a small text excerpt explaining that the origin of the zone is unknown. Maybe it was a meteor, maybe it was aliens, troops were sent in and never returned. Since then, it has been cordoned off and blockaded by the police and army. We then cut to a crummy apartment somewhere in the definitely not Soviet Union. We see a man sneak out of the room trying not to wake his wife and daughter. This is the Stalker, or the Guide as some fans took to calling him. His wife gives him shit about going back to the zone when he said he wouldn't anymore. Then he leaves. In the very next scene, we meet a well-to-do man with a cute girl and a fancy car. This is Ryder. He is, wait for it, a writer. They both go inside a canteen where the final member of the group is waiting, the professor. The writer has a few drinks and seems to take this trip a lot less seriously than the Stalker and professor. They discuss their reasons for seeking out the zone. Ryder wants to search for the truth about the zone and reignite his inspiration. Professor is less forthcoming and only states that he's a scientist and wishes to observe the zone up close. They finish their drinks and go to leave, but Ryder wants to go back and buy cigarettes for the trip. He is stopped by Professor, who tells him he should not go back. This is a nod to an old superstition that it's bad luck to go backwards when starting a journey. They hop in a truck and make their way to the police border of the zone, sneaking and sleuthing their way past police patrols. They wait until the gates are open to let a cargo train pass through and quickly follow behind before the gates are closed again. The police do spot them and attempt to shoot them, but the police don't dare follow them into the actual zone. As they make their way into the zone via an old service rail, there's a great transition. As they leave the drab, brown vignette of the outside world behind, the world becomes colorful and vibrant as they enter the zone. Though we follow all three characters, we are seeing things through the eyes of the Stalker. The change from flat brown to color, and the Stalker being in a state of almost euphoria when resting in the brush, tells us that he feels free, unburdened, and more at home in the zone than the outside world. After a brief rest, the gang begin their trek through the overgrowth. During this time, Ryder doesn't take the zone too seriously and wants to walk wherever he wants to walk and do whatever he wants to do. The Stalker scolds him, stating the zone demands respect, otherwise it'll punish you. They travel a while more, trudging through the undergrowth, using metal nuts with fabric tied to them to mark paths safe for travel. They eventually stop again for rest and have a deep discussion about life, people's true intentions, happiness, and the outside world. This is one of many in the film where Tarkovsky uses long one-take shots to make a, how do I explain this, more realistic conversation feeling. It feels a lot more like people having a real conversation than it does actors reading a script. And it works flawlessly in this movie, I really have to say. Eventually they move on and we come to two of the most recognized parts of the Stalker film. The tunnel scene, where the writer draws the short lot and goes first.
Здесь дверь какая-то.
It's at this point we see that the writer's previous nonchalant bravado has all but faded away. He proceeds very timidly and is clearly afraid of any misfortune befalling him. Then, after the tunnel scene, we get to the anomalous room, where Ryder takes a wrong turn and walks into a trap. Stalker and Professor seem terrified of the room. A bird glitches through the room, and for a moment it seems Ryder is being affected by some unseen force. He does pass out, but wakes up alive, and the Stalker compliments him that he must be extremely lucky and will probably live to be 100. They then leave the room, count their blessings, and continue onward. At this point, it's important to note that the group is soaking wet, cold, hungry, and tired from walking all day. I mean, I watched them, and at this point, even I felt tired. After a final short rest, the group does it. They arrive at the area all comers seek, the room. The room where once inside, the zone will grant not a wish, but the innermost desires of the one that enters the room. Regardless of what Ryder and Professor said they came to the zone for, this room and its fantastical powers are why they are really here. It's also here that Professor reveals he brought a bomb with him and wants to use it to destroy the room. The Stalker fights with him, attempting to wrestle the bomb away from the Professor, only to be overpowered by Ryder and Professor together. It's here we get the most powerful bit of acting and dialogue in the film, where the stalker rants about how his freedom, dignity, and happiness are all here in the zone. That he brings broken men, broken by the outside world here, in search of hope. And that the stalker has faith that the zone can bring hope to those who come in search of it. And he gets angry that Ryder and Professor seek to break his faith and destroy a source of hope in a hopeless world.
Ведь ничего не осталось у людей на земле больше. Это ведь единственное место, куда можно прийти, если надеяться больше не на что. Ведь вы же пришли. Зачем же уничтожаете веру? Сталкеру нельзя входить в комнату. Сталкеру вообще нельзя входить в зону с корыстной целью. Нельзя, вспомните дикобраза. Да, вы правы, я гнида, я ничего не сделал. В этом мире ничего не могу здесь сделать. Я и жене не смог ничего дать. И друзей у меня нет, и быть не может. Но моего вы у меня не отнимайте. У меня и так уж все отняли там. За колючей проволокой. Все мое здесь, понимаете? Здесь, в зоне. Счастье мое, свобода моя, достоинство, все здесь. Я ведь привожу сюда таких же, как я, несчастных, замученных. Им не на что больше надеяться. А я могу, понимаете, я могу им помочь. Никто им помочь не может, а я гнида могу. Я от счастья плакать готов, что могу им помочь. Вот и все. Ничего не хочу больше.
After all is said and done, none of the men enter the room. Partly because they don't want to be the ones to destroy this magical thing, but also because they are terrified of what their true inner desires are that the room will grant to them. So they rest for a moment and eventually leave the zone. We don't see them leave. It just cuts to the canteen from the start and the brown vignette has returned, as we're now back in the outside world. However, there is a splash of color when the stalker is reunited with his wife and daughter, hinting to us that the zone is not the only thing that brings joy to his life. Upon returning home, the stalker is a bit crestfallen. Ryder and Professor didn't really learn from the experience, and he goes to bed exhausted and defeated. Also, there's an end scene where the stalker's daughter moves things with an unseen power. I'm not really sure what that means. And then the movie ends. So there's an assload of symbolism, metaphors, philosophical discussion, and other galaxy brain action going on in the Stalker movie. Some of it is kind of obvious, like the symbology of Ryder putting on the crown of branches. Some pretty blunt Christian iconography there. But some are more vague, like what's going on with the Stalker daughter, and like many things that happen in the Stalker movie, we don't really get an answer to a lot of them. The Stalker mentions that stalkers are forbidden from entering the wish-granting room, and it's theorized that he broke the rules and entered the room to make a wish, but the zone granted his true desires, and whatever they were that were made true affected his daughter. But like I said, these are all just theories. Nothing really gets answered, nothing really gets resolved, so we don't actually know. There are many videos and essays discussing how Tarkovsky has made many themes operating on many different layers of the film. For more in-depth analysis on that type of stuff, feel free to go search up some of those videos, because admittedly a lot of the stuff goes right over my head. The movie has a running commentary on faith, fatalism, religion, nihilism, hope, and true happiness. It's important to note that Tarkovsky had to navigate some sort of tricky waters in the Soviet Union. The Soviets were known to censor a lot of art and media that openly criticized socialism and state conformity. The political and philosophical commentary of the film had to be disguised, diluted, and made kind of vague because it needed to pass the censorship board. That loosely ties into the next segment of this review discussion. The journey to make the Stalker film was a struggle full of hardship and mishaps that almost broke the cast and crew. After the first few months of filming, improper storage and mistakes in the development of the film reels had ruined almost all of the footage they had, basically sending them back to square one in terms of filming progress. This caused Tarkovsky to fire a bunch of the crew, from lowly cameramen to the cinematographer Grigory Renberg. Tarkovsky then hired Leonid Kalashnikov as cinematographer, and they started filming Stalker for a second time. But only after a few scenes, Tarkovsky hated the footage. He said there was no magic to the footage and that it was completely flat and boring. So he fired Leonid Kalashnikov and hired Alexander Kniazinski as cinematographer. They started filming Stalker again for the third time, and this third version of the film starts when the group enters the zone using the rail car. Allegedly, Alexander's version of the film is very different from the first original version, but his version is the version we see in the final cut. The filming locations were also miserable to work in. The cast and crew worked knee-deep in dirty water polluted with oily residue and chemical runoff. This shot on screen now is one of the two surviving shots from the original film. The strange substance here is actually the brownish-reddish foam, which is waste from a paper mill upstream dumping its waste into the river. Shots of the characters walking near or past active industrial buildings were filmed at real-world power plants. The scenes in the factory complex as the group is sneaking past the cordon to the zone were filmed at an old chemical refinery. The cast and crew would regularly report bad smells and vapors coming off pools of water. This led to regular complaints of headaches, nausea, and crew members being out of commission due to allergic reactions. Working in these toxic environments for months on end was probably a major contributing factor that led to many lives being cut short. The most notable ones being Anatoly Solzhenitsyn, dead at 47 from cancer, Tarkovsky's wife Larissa, dead at 60 from cancer, and the most heartbreaking is the main man himself, Andrei Tarkovsky. In 1979, shortly after Stalker, Tarkovsky would begin traveling to Italy. Then, in 1982, he would make the decision to never return to Russia. Now free from the Soviet Union, it would unfortunately be only 4 years until his death. In Tarkovsky's diary, January 1st, 1986, he writes, "We greeted the new year, did not invite anyone. I am not feeling well. The only guests by the big festivities table were Andrei Yablinsky, Gaetano, and Lucy. I tried to keep a stiff upper lip and not ruin the holiday. There were toasts to my health, to reunions with Diapa and Anna Semyonova this year, to realization of my creative plans. I barely held out. We received a multitude of greeting cards and telephone calls. We phoned to Moscow, talked to our dears there. Lord, strengthen my will. Life is so difficult, simply unbearable. Larissa worries about my health a lot. She insists that I should call a doctor, and she looks at me somehow anxiously and searchingly, as if she suspects something. I keep putting off that horrible moment of telling her. I'm afraid. The pain increases with every passing day. I have to get a new prescription at once. My head feels heavy. It's difficult to even read. Only one thought. What will happen to Lara and the children?" Andrei Tarkovsky would die in Paris on the 29th of December, 1986, from cancer. He was 54 years old. Stalker is just a small glimpse into the creative vision of Andrei Tarkovsky. His other films, like his 1972 film Solaris and his 1975 film The Mirror, name a few, are further proof that Tarkovsky had the eye when creating magic with the camera. Even with some of the criticisms I leveled against the film earlier in this video, Its beauty and its rightful place in the annals of acclaimed cinema cannot be denied. I recommend to anyone, fan of Russian cinema or not, to give Stalker a watch. As this review, general thoughts, whatever you want to call this video, comes to an end, my final thought is only this. Andrei Tarkovsky, wherever you are, thank you.
Andrei, cos'è l'arte?
Короче говоря, мне кажется, что для того, чтобы строить любую концепцию, в частности, взгляд на искусство, следует прежде всего ответить на другой вопрос, гораздо более важный и общий. Вообще, зачем человек живет, в чем смысл человеческого существования?